And I guess this has been one of the drivers throughout my entire career, is I want to be able to feel like I can make a difference. The first job after uni is the grounding. And I stopped and went, I didn't really find, and that's, of course, because I was working the whole way through uni.
Yeah.
It was a case of potentially transforming a business before transformation became a thing. That was the sort of opportunity, and you sort of ran with those opportunities and sort of went, okay, don't know too much about it, but let's work with other people in the team. Let's work with the additional resources around.
Were you kind of self-driven to find those opportunities, or were you kind of being tapped on the shoulder?
I was probably to an extent being tapped on the shoulder, but it was always a case of yes.
What would be your kind of definition of good strategy? That's a hard question. I appreciate that.
That's a really hard question. Women will only go for a role when they're 100% ready. I'd often give myself a damn good talking to and going, no.
Yeah.
You match 70% of those, go for it. Management is almost looking in.
Yeah.
And leadership is looking out.
Leanne Ayers, a seasoned and results-driven head of PMO, is known for her track record of delivering lasting change through successful project implementations. Leanne's experience spans renowned organisations such as Suncorp Group, Delaware North, HostPlus, APT Travel, and most recently, the Victorian Electoral Commission. As an innovative and lateral thinker, Leanne's expertise lies in developing and executing lasting business improvements, customer-driven solutions, and cultural change initiatives. Join us as we delve into Leanne's journey, exploring her insights, lessons, and the secret sauce for good project management, learned from her extensive experience in driving impactful change. Leanne, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
One of the best things about doing this podcast is there's certain people that come on that I know pretty well. And I get to go and sort of rummage around in their past and learn a few things and test my assumptions of what I thought I knew about that person, and I'm often surprised. And the first thing that actually took me by surprise is that it looks like you were born and grew up in New South Wales in Sydney.
That's exactly right. I'm a Sydney girl, born and bred.
There you go. So that was kind of early life for you. That's where your family were, and where.
Absolutely. So family were there. We stayed in Sydney really until early 2000s.
Yeah, right.
So the first chunk of my career was actually based in Sydney, and it was actually, we came down here. We were never really sure how long. We came down for a role, one of my roles, and we never really had the conversation about would we ever go back. So 17 years later, we're still here.
You tempted? You ever tempted to go back?
No, not now. I've actually been able to get more of my family down. So it's sort of a case of they're slowly heading south. So that makes it even better now. But our son, he may have been born in Sydney, but he far more considers himself a Melbourneite than a Sydneyite. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we're pretty firmly wedded down here now.
It's something actually, when I first came to Australia, I didn't quite realise the rivalry between Melbourne and Sydney. I kind of liken it now to the rivalry or the difference between, say, London and Manchester, which is quite interesting. And they're two very different culturally sort of places to be, and I think it's kind of relatable here. So I'm pretty confident PMO with three letters that a young Leanne wasn't and better night kind of thing. I'm one day PMO. This is where I'm going to go.
Yep.
So what were you dreaming of becoming as a kid?
Look, I think I was one of those people who really didn't have much of an idea as far as what I was going to do.
Yeah.
My whole family, I grew up in a family of builders, so I actually knew I wasn't going to be a builder. But I guess early, when I was very little, people go, "Oh, do you want to be Daddy's secretary or something like that?" And part of me was always going, "No, I think I might try and aim a bit higher than Dad's secretary. Thank you very much."
Yeah.
But one of the reasons why I did a business degree was because I really wasn't actually sure where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. So I've always admired people who can turn around and go, "I knew from the age of 12 that I wanted to be in tech," or I always wanted to be a vet or whatever. I've sort of admired that because that's never been me, and I've always been one of these people who sort of have thought, oh, okay, I'm happy to give this an explore and see if I like it and have a dabble and go from there. So there was never really any biting, passion as far as what I wanted to do when I grew up.
But you know what? I don't think it's a bad thing. I've certainly read stuff. I think it's from Adam Grant. and he talks about this and says, one of the worst things you can ask a kid is, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because in many ways, it doesn't really foster a growth mindset. It kind of says, you're 10 and you're going to kind of pick what you're going to be for the rest of your life. It's and let's be honest, I think most people, as they grow up, aren't probably aware of 90% of occupations that actually exist. There's the ones we see on television or movies, or our families do. So it's interesting you did the business degree. Were your family sort of self-employed in that sense, as it was their own? Yeah, okay. So do you think that kind of fostered an interest in commerce and business in you?
Oh, look, it made me very aware from a very young age, an awful lot about the need for money, the importance of business. For them, partly it was passion, and it became a family business for a while there. And building industry is a hard game, and a little bit feast and famine as far as how business cycles go. And so you're always on. Yeah. And it was always the topic of conversation around the table. So it certainly meant that for me, partly it was understanding that business is big or small, there's people's livelihoods at stake.
Yeah.
And can you keep a roof over the house, a roof over the family, and all those sorts of things. But it also made me very aware that building was something I was never going to go into.
It's interesting that it's pretty relatable. I sort of come from a family of self-employed people.
Yeah.
And I've got vivid memories of being a child sitting with my dad on a Saturday counting the takings for the week.
Yeah.
And kind of understanding the importance of cash. And also never lost on me that there was a customer that had given him that cash.
Yes.
If that makes sense. That then walked away with something in return.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite sort of formative when you kind of very firsthand see those experiences, I think, as a kid.
It is. And even in Dad's case, because it was Dad's business, he was employing other people as well. So you're responsible for other people's livelihoods. And again, sometimes business goes well and business increases, other times business isn't, and you're caught in a credit crunch and business starts to reduce, so you're letting people go. And there's some memories there which aren't such fun memories because the stress and the pressure which that put the family under when you know that it's your whole livelihood which is at stake at times.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of glamour associated with owning your own business.
Oh, I have to confess, it's never been a desire.
No, that's not on the bucket list.
No.
Okay. So I saw kind of once you finished up your degree, there's a bit of a gap on LinkedIn. That's always the best bits of the gaps, right? Because that's kind of what was really going on. But I think it picks up in 1998 with Royal Sun Alliance.
Yes.
It doesn't say your year of graduation, so I'm not sure how small that void is. But kind of what was going on, uni, coming out of uni, until you kind of popped up at RSA.
Yeah, look. Again, partly, I guess, influenced by family, and I didn't really reflect on this until we were preparing for this. I did 4 years of my uni degree part-time. So I went straight from school, straight into working full-time and doing my uni degree part-time. And I think when I look back, I'm going, why did I do that? Partly because that was exactly what my brothers did with their building degrees and when they were going through uni as well. So I did 4 years of the uni part-time, and during that time, I thought I actually had it all worked out. I was working for a stockbroker. I was working for JB Weir. And I was thinking, right, I'm going to have my uni degree. I'm going to get my graduate diploma in applied finance and investment. I'm going to work in stockbroking. And then we had crashes and the recession, which we had to have.
Yep.
So during those years, it was sort of like, well, what am I going to do? So I fell into, answered a job at Friends Provident, and spent a few years, exploring what it is. So managing unit trust prospectuses, which was a fabulous as far as where does an attention to detail come from when you've got to roll over unit trust prospectuses and you've got to make sure that there are full stops in the right places and there's the right number of gaps and all those sorts of things. So into Prudential for a while and played in there for a while with startups, and then landed in Royal Sun Alliance.
So that was just so I'm clear, when you were studying, you were at JB Weir?
Studying at JB Weir.
And that was the part-time, and then sort of post-graduation, you went into those roles. It's interesting because you're the second person. Recently, we had another guest that was exactly the same. They did their degree over 6 years, part-time, and worked as a bank teller.
Yep.
And we were talking about how sort of studying and working, you learn to juggle, multitask, really quite early on, but also you're in the kind of throes of working, so you're learning that rhythm and you're learning about customer experience and what it takes to be successful in the workplace. Would you say that's true for you? Did that kind of shape you in terms of making you more work fit, let's say, post-university?
Look, it's been interesting because I know certainly some of your guests have talked about the fact that the first job after uni is the grounding. And I stopped and went, I didn't really find, and that's of course because I was working the whole way through uni.
Yeah.
Oh, well, for most of uni, 12 months off to finish the degree. But it really meant that those first 4 years, you had to have good time management. You had to be disciplined. You had to meet the demands of both. And I certainly think that I look back now on, well, where does that ability to be efficient when I'm working and that ability to juggle deadlines and work out what needs to be done. I think I got that very natural education during that period. Yeah. And it certainly meant, I vividly recall, when I was full-time uni, I was sitting in a lecture and someone said something about, well, if I didn't like what my boss was saying, I'd just tell him. And I sort of was thinking, but work doesn't always work like that. Yeah. And I think it's because that balance between having already been in the workplace for a number of years, you sort of come out and you're sort of kind of organisation fit, if you like, as far as you know what to expect in the workplace and you know how a workplace operates before you've walked in the door with the uni degree now attached to you,
Yeah, definitely. There's a reality to work. And I'd probably make the point that you actually learned that as a child, kind of being exposed to business and your parents' business, because again, there's not many kids that see that. They kind of see those kind of mechanics. They just see mum and dad go out to work. Yes. Or probably work from home these days, but they see them do work.
And a computer.
A computer, and then the work stops. Yeah. I know it's something at home we're very transparent with the kids about what we do, and we'll talk about our jobs and work, and we bring them into the office and so forth, because I think it's really important to kind of sow those seeds fairly early on. So you ended up at Royal Sun Alliance. Yes. And that was in a project coordinator role.
It was.
I believe that's right.
It was.
So what kind of appealed to you about that opportunity that made you kind of go, oh, I've got what it takes to be a great project coordinator?
Well, once again, I actually fell into the role. I was very lucky at my time at Royal Sun Alliance. And when Royal Sun Alliance became Shannon's, that there were a couple of people there who either looked out for me or could see potential there. And in the case of the project coordinator role, I remember one of them, one day I rocked into a meeting and they sort of went, Leanne, can you run the meeting for us? And I just sort of looked and went, okay. But it was that was it. And he said to me afterwards, yeah, that was good. You can start to do that. And he just started to throw more work my way and starting to become that project coordinator. And again, I think when you're the sort of person who's had to be organised either from uni and from part-time and those sorts of things, it becomes a very natural fit. And the other thing I liked when I started to look at projects is that life's always changing. So your days are never the same. You go from one project to another. So you're learning stuff on one project, you then go and do a completely different sort of project. In those days, it could be just organising a office relocation or helping implement a telephone system or anything like that. So the variety, I think, is something which then, and I know we'll go through the rest of the career, but that variety, I think, has been something I've always looked for.
Yeah, okay. So the same structure or concept of project management, but within a different application or field or
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I read on your resume that, and again, timing-wise would make sense, that was around Y2K as well.
Yes, and Y2K was really that first big project where you sort of go, oh, this is, and sometimes I always have, and I still do it, is sometimes you take half a step back out of the situation and you sort of watch and go, oh, I like what I'm seeing here. Or, oh, I like the way that person's behaving. Or, oh, that's an interesting job. And you take that half a step back and just watch rather than being in it. And so Y2K was really that one of those ones where it's a case of, well, is the world about to fall over? And seeing it all come together, it was probably the first really big project that I was part of and able to see how this was possible.
Well, I think it was interesting, and again, maybe I'm a little bit biased because of sort of my own age and time I came into the workplace, but it felt like the first kind of big tech thing to happen. Tech was kind of becoming more commonplace in business. Computers were appearing and people were becoming more computer savvy and literate, and then suddenly Y2K.
Yeah.
And this kind of almost wrap your head around the idea that things may stop working next week, or obviously when it ticks over. So I think it really, I actually wonder how much did it advance technology through companies having to kind of invest and look at their risk and exposure, and kind of realize the potential of technology.
I think it was partly that, but also very quickly the reliance.
Yeah.
And I think maybe that's where it stopped being just a tool. It was something where, hang on, this has got the power to fundamentally affect how we do things, whatever that would be.
That's right.
And I think that was also one of those areas where it was suddenly a really big change, and it's not just something which we happen to have on our desk and it can help us do a few bits and pieces like an Excel spreadsheet. There's this power that it can be so much more than that, and it can affect us in ways we probably haven't even thought of yet.
Well, it was kind of treated, computers were treated like an electronic typewriter.
Yeah.
Right, to a certain degree.
Absolutely.
It's like a word processor.
Yeah.
Which I'm not sure you even hear that word anymore, or phrase, but that would have been the kind of first disruption, if you like, and then I guess like the internet, and then kind of where we are now with AI and everything else. It's just that kind of continuation, I think, of what was going on at that time. I saw that kind of through that, kind of post that, obviously were incredibly successful in that role, and you then built a brilliant career in Suncorp Group across many of their brands. I think I kind of listed them here. I had Shannon's, where you worked in compliance, AAI, Projects and Change, AEPIA. It sounds like a Specsavers test, doesn't it? Strategy and systems as well on a kind of group level at Suncorp. But I know from previous conversations with you that there was that role at Shannon's that really kind of was formative, really shaped you, and I know that you still hold that very fondly.
I do.
Why? What was kind of going on in that role?
I think the time at Shannon's was one of those instances where you just happened to be at the right place at the right time. Again, I was lucky that the general manager who was leading the Shannon's team at that space, and one of the guys who was actually one of our strategy guys, the pair of them, I got along with them really well, and they threw me just so many opportunities. So it was a case of potentially transforming a business before transformation became a thing.
Yeah.
So we were, again, doing such a range of things. We were upgrading systems, as in underwriting systems. We were implementing compliance guidelines. So the Financial Service Reform Act came through that time. Privacy Act came through that time, which is why Andy, my boss at the time, went, Leanne, you're pretty good at projects. Here's a project for you. And it was aptly implementing FSRA.
Yeah.
And we didn't really have a compliance person. So all of a sudden I'm quality and compliance. It's sort of a case of, and projects.
Yeah.
But that was the sort of opportunity. And you sort of ran with those opportunities and sort of went, okay, don't know too much about it, but let's work with other people in the team. Let's work with the additional resources around what was Promenade was a holding company then, and WAI is a holding company as well. We work with those people who are prepared to share their information, share their knowledge, guide you along the way.
Yeah.
But it just kept on opening up more and more things, and it was.
Were you kind of self-driven to find those opportunities, or were you kind of being tapped on the shoulder?
I was probably to an extent being tapped on the shoulder, but it was always a case of yes. So it wasn't ever a case of nah.
Yes before the tap or during the tap.
It was not a case of sure, you want me to try and have a crack at compliance? Sure, I'll have a crack at compliance.
Yeah.
Okay, we're implementing a telephone system? Okay, let's go implement a telephone system.
Yeah. Where did that courage come from?
I don't know. I think it was a case of potentially part of it was I shared the vision of where, when you've got great leaders and you understand where they want to take a business, it makes it much easier to be on that journey with them and going, sure, okay, I want to help. I want to contribute to that. And so I think it was sort of a case of when you buy in and you can see the light on the hill, you actually going, yep, I want to contribute. I want to make this a success. And Shannon's was just one of those organisations where I felt, and I guess this has been one of the drivers throughout my entire career, is I want to be able to feel like I can make a difference. And at the end of my time there, I can walk away and I can look back and go, did I help make a difference? And it's sort of a case of, yeah, I think we did. Shannon's 134646 because it's 13 go-go. That was the sort of conversations we're having, and it's still there today. You sort of look at that today and it's sort of a case of, I was a little part of that. And no doubt there's many, many people who have gone through the door since and after me, but, there's a little bit of my DNA still around the place, which I really like that I was able to make a difference.
Yeah, that's great. I think, look, I've got a ton of questions around this stuff, but I know in insurance, the customer experience is critical.
Yes.
And there was something you and I were discussing a few weeks ago around customer intimacy.
Yes.
And you kind of captured it brilliantly in terms of what that meant at Shannon's. And I was just going to ask you, I was going to try and get you on camera to say it, because it left an impact on me, and I kind of took it away and spoke with my team, but you described it brilliantly. So
it's the moments of truth.
That's it, the moments of truth.
And the rationale behind that is that taking any company, you take an insurance company, you can always take the premiums. You can have an automatic debit system take up, you can take people's money, you roll over the insurance premium every year. And for most of the times people are fine with that. But there's going to be a time where they need you, and that's usually a claim time. And so it's the moment when you're ringing them up and you're sort of going, I need to make a claim.
Yeah.
That's the moment of truth. As far as how do you respond? Do you sort of go, particularly in Shannon's, which is about car enthusiasts, mate, what happened? Oh, no. Oh, mate, I'm really sorry to hear that. And have that genuine empathy with someone who is potentially really upset about what's just happened to their pride and joy. And you take that through, but that's the moment of truth which people can be looking for. And I guess it's sort of a kernel I've always kept with me, that whenever you've got an organisation which is customer facing, you've got those moments of truth when it's sort of a case of, well, how are you going to respond during that time?
Yeah, okay. So it's kind of really understanding within the business that where is the customer experience, where is that moment being tested?
Yeah.
Because as you say, it's very easy to focus on the point of sale.
Yes.
But there's probably another moment somewhere down the track. I asked you a few minutes ago where your courage came from, and I did have a kind of follow-up point, because I was listening to you as you were talking about courage. I felt what you were describing is what many people today would talk about as psychological safety.
Okay.
As in people feeling safe at work.
Yes.
Safe to fail.
Yes.
Safe to come and be themselves, and to work for inspirational leaders that will back them, support them, nurture them. That would be my interpretation. Would that be fair? Or
it would be, and it would probably be a very 2020s portrayal of what was going on without even realising it.
Yeah.
It was a sort of place where, safe to fail is always such an interesting word, because you do want people to feel safe to fail.
Yeah.
So long as it's not going to break the whole system in the process. So, but it was that ability to, go with it and extend yourself, and maybe sometimes even not really realising how much you were extending yourself until you actually look back on it.
Yeah.
You're so much in the day-to-day. You're so much going, okay, we're doing this project, and then we're going to do that project, and we're doing this project, and you realise you're having fun, which I think is an important aspect of a job and a role. But it's really only sometimes even when you're coming back to write up the resume and you go, well, what have I done over the last few years? And it's like, oh, okay, I'm coming out a different person to what I came in. And again, some of those leaders and people I worked with, the people who I really respected how they worked and how they thought, and their willingness to throw things around and challenge and all those sorts of good things, that if you can learn from those sorts of people as you're going along, it leaves a mark.
Yeah, it does. Look, I think, again, many people that are great leaders become great leaders is also because they bring great people on the journey. So I'm going to ask you to part the humility for a second, and I'm going to ask you, what do you think they saw in you to kind of bring you on that journey? What did you display that they kind of liked in you?
Probably the ability to get stuff done.
Yeah, okay.
I think that was one element of it. And some of those people in response. I was also willing to challenge and sometimes have the debate. I wouldn't just automatically accept something and go, yep, okay. You were encouraged to think about things and ask the questions, and is this the best way to do it? Could we do it a different way? So that willingness to ask the hard questions, as I said, the commitment to deliver. But I also think, and this is again something I've always taken with me, that managing so that there's no surprises. So one of the principles I have always maintained with whoever I'm reporting to or working for is that I don't believe in you having a nasty surprise about something I knew about. Yeah. So I really like my directors or whoever I'm working for to walk into a meeting with no surprises. And that's something that to this day, I practiced it back then. Yeah. Probably because it's one of those lessons you just learn the wrong way around at some dim, dark part of your past. But they're the sorts of things. So, deliver, work hard, and no surprises along the way. Yeah.
Do you think those kind of traits came naturally to you, or are there aspects of that you had to work on to sort of self-develop?
The willingness to challenge, no, that came very, very naturally to me because I was the youngest by 11 years. So the only way for me to, against older big brothers. Yeah. So I had to find my voice. That willingness to challenge and that willingness to ask those sorts of questions has always been there. So that was very natural. The no surprises, I guess that is just something you learn. You only really need someone to come out of a meeting and go, I didn't know about that. For you to sort of go, damn it, I did. Really probably should have told you beforehand. And to, again, if they're people you respect and you don't want to let them down, then you sort of take that one personally.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's it is. And I think, again, I think it's hard, not for everyone, but for some people kind of coming into their career and having that, again, spoken about courage, but it's there again, isn't it? The courage to give the bad news and frame it in a way. And I think that's where kind of mentoring and coaching for people can come in. Did you have a mentor or coach at any point in your career?
I certainly had a mentor who, again, actually from those Shannon's days, who was someone who I really respected and again, that ability to think and ask questions constructively. He had a profound impact on the way I will look at things at times. As for the other part of it, I also think, though, that I will look at leaders and managers and sort of go, well, what do I like about your style? Mm-hmm. Why do I want to work for you? What is it that I respect, or I see you in action? And I think for me, quite often it's been really great managers who sort of go, I really like that about you. Yeah. And then you take it on board and sort of go, if I can actually grab a little bit of that and take that and learn from that, then I think I'm going to be a better manager and be a better leader of my teams. So I think that's been the other way, which I've often looked at it. And conversely, sometimes when you're sort of seeing someone, behaving in a way, you sort of go, oh, no, tuck that one away. Don't want to work like that. Don't want to behave that way. So it works both ways. You look for the things you really like, and then if you sort of see something you don't like, it's sort of a case of, I don't want to ever be sort of seeing, having an out-of-body experience, seeing myself and behaving in that way. So you take that and learn from that as well.
That's interesting. That's a kind of different type of self-awareness, isn't it? It's reflective awareness of somebody else and how you assimilate that. I think, again, that's been a really consistent theme across these podcasts. I think I described it as Frankenstein's monster at one point. It's this kind of patchwork of taking the traits from other people, of how you put yourself together. That's interesting. I saw, shifting a bit, so your last role with Suncorp, you worked across strategy, and you kind of worked with the different parts of the group, helping them to develop strategic business plans and so forth. I feel the word strategy is so overused and people have all sorts of wacky interpretations, and it just gets, my strategy for this is this and the other. Often they're talking about a plan. Yeah. So I was just interested, what would be your kind of definition of good strategy? It's a hard question. I appreciate that.
That's a really hard question. Look, I think to me a really good strategy is identifying that light on the hill, and then how are you going to get there?
Yeah.
And that strategy, I agree with you, strategy does get bounded around a bit, and it's sort of a case of quite often you're talking more about a business plan for the next 12 months rather than actually your strategy. But that 3-year, that 5-year, where do you want to be? What do you want to achieve? How are you going to get there? What's the external market look like? All those sorts of things. And then what are you going to do? And how? And I think the other part as far as what makes a good strategy is how do you then bring everyone along with you to achieve it?
Yep.
You can have the best strategy in the world, but if it's sitting on a shelf gathering dust, then it's not going to be much good to anybody.
Yeah.
So I sort of think it's something where it's a stretch, but it's achievable.
Yeah.
So again, a fair degree of pragmatism along with a little bit of optimism and a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But then also, as that light on the hill, what's the roadmap for how you're going to get there?
Yeah.
And that's what I see as far as being what makes up a really good strategy. And sometimes that strategy might even be what we're not going to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sorry, I think sometimes knowing what you're not is just as important as knowing what you are. And that's how you and I previously talked about customer intimacy and kind of different models of recruitment in terms of what that experience can look like, rather than everybody kind of putting it together as one homogenous group of recruiters.
Yes.
That's a terrible thought, by the way, isn't it? But, that's again interesting. And I'm imagining in that role there's a lot of stakeholder engagement because you're working with different businesses and advising on that. How did you kind of navigate that?
That one was the lovely thing about that role was that it was Suncorp had a range of niche businesses. So APO, which was the over 50s insurance, Shannon's Car Enthusiasts, CIL Caravan Insurance Leaders. So it was actually about working with each of them to identify what their strategy was going to be, how it was different to the next brand in the stable. So because you certainly didn't want cannibalism of brands and all those sorts of things. And then working with the various stakeholders in the business to actually develop them. So it was a fun role because you're bouncing around backwards and forwards between the different brands and trying to really understand what made each of those brands different.
Yeah.
And how you maintain that, and at the same time not cannibalising between, particularly someone like a car enthusiast who happens to be over 50, which brand do they go with?
Yeah, exactly. So you can really therefore look at the target audience and the proposition, and I guess you had the advantage of not being wedded to one of those brands, where you can kind of remain neutral and say, well, hang on a second, you're straying into the territory over here, and because it is incredibly expensive for companies to have multi-brand strategy and to maintain, and even probably more so today because there's so many channels where your brand can be present.
Yes.
Across social media and kind of different places and stuff. So unless you've got that differentiation of strategy, audience, proposition, there's almost no point in having a multi-brand approach. I would argue.
Yeah.
But so you left Suncorp after 12 years. That must have been pretty tough.
That was a redundancy, and it was sort of a case of I took a good couple of months off, which first time I'd done, in my career. I don't think I've done it since actually. And it was fabulous. It gave me a chance to do the school pickup run, or actually the school drop off and the school pickup run.
Yeah, okay.
Just be a mum for a while and not have competing demands and all those sorts of things. So, but it was also a part of, I think I can vividly recall, I sort of thought, I think I went out of project management for a while. And so hence, when I got back in there, it's sort of a case of I didn't know what I wanted exactly, but I wanted out of finance for a while, or insurance.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted something totally different.
Because you moved to Delaware North.
Exactly.
Which sounds like an American state. I decided when I was looking at this, is it? No. But it's actually a hospitality group, isn't it? And it's the MCG and Sydney Cricket Ground. And
it is. It's and down here in Melbourne, it's Melbourne Olympic Park. So they do all the catering and hospitality for the Australian Open. For a while there, they had presence, I don't know whether they still do, but they had presence in every airport. So, when you walk through Melbourne Airport,
right.
you can see all of the cafes and all the rest of it. That's Delaware North as well. So, and just a fascinating opportunity to go into a completely different business to what I'd been in before. And I can vividly recall within my first week or two a conversation which went along the lines of, we're bumping into RLA for the AO. And I'm sort of going, I think I can count how many of those words I understood, and into and were some of them. It's sort of a case of when you're learning a whole new language and a whole new business model and a completely different industry. And it was great because it was sort of a case of, well, how transferable are these skills?
Yeah.
And that was one of the real reasons I took that sort of job, was to sort of go, can I actually transfer the skills I've got here into something completely different?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of people think once they're wedded to one industry, they're kind of wedded to that industry or the associated industries, and certainly insurance to hospitality. You've crossed that boundary, so to speak. Were they kind of interested in your experiences from insurance in terms of what they took away from it, or was it more you kind of had to kind of figure out how they did things? Oh,
very much the latter.
Yeah.
They were such different industries. It's more about what were the skills I could bring, and a lot of their focus was quality assurance and customer delivery and those sorts of things. So to start off with, that's actually what I went in there for. But once a project manager, always a project manager. Slowly, it's sort of a case of, we're doing a project. I've got project management skills. So, before too long, I was back and doing a bit of project management along the way. But it was more the skills which I had brought along with me rather than the specific experience which went with them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess there's probably, dare I say it, more maturity in the insurance industry around project management than there probably is in hospitality at that point.
Yes and no. If you sort of think about the amount of effort which goes into pulling together something like the Australian Open and making sure you've got all the hospitality, and you think about the logistics behind that, they're enormous.
Yeah.
That's actually project management on steroids.
Yeah.
So in that respect, actually, there is some very sophisticated and some very talented people who pull together that sort of those sorts of projects and deliver that work.
It was a huge operation. You talk about the moment of truth in the insurance. I guess the moment of truth at the Oz Open is people at their seats watching the tennis. They've got a drink, they've got some food, and
they've got an ice cream.
They're being entertained.
Yeah, exactly.
And they're doing that quick between points, sets, whatever. They're not missing too much of the actual action.
Yeah.
And you can get in and out pretty quick.
Yeah.
With minimal disruption.
And with a smile, and you make them feel like they're actually there. One of the things which the family which owned Delaware North was very passionate about was actually the guest experience. So even if you're rocking into the AO and you're sort of going, can I have a soft drink and can I have an ice cream and choc top, please? It's sort of a case of, do you at least sort of walk away with someone going, enjoy the tennis?
Yeah.
And it's just a small thing, but it's sort of, rather than just sort of, who's behind you next? It's actually, it may not be Anton, enjoy the tennis, but at least you're sort of looking at someone going, enjoy the tennis. Okay, who's next, please? And so actually giving just that little bit extra of customer service along the way.
Yeah, that's great. And let's be honest, it's not cheap to go to the tennis, but you definitely want the value. At that point, had you moved to Melbourne or were you still in Sydney?
Yes, no, we moved down during my AAI days. So, we came down in about 2006.
So I'm always interested in when people move interstate. How did you sort of go about setting up life here? What challenges did you face?
I think one of the we got some great advice. So I was lucky because I was moving within the group. I actually already knew my new manager and a lot of the team really well because I'd been flying backwards and forwards from Sydney to Melbourne, doing that kangaroo hop as we always do.
Yeah.
A QF 601 out of Sydney. I knew a lot of the people there. So it was actually quite easy to get advice from them about ideas on where to live, where do we send the child to school, all those sorts of things. We had a lot of really good advice there, which set us up really well. But, and it was interesting because I've listened again to some of the podcasts for people who have moved in overseas, and it's a case of you move down to Melbourne and you might only know 2 or 3 people, so you still have to break in and make a network.
Yeah.
And for us, a chunk of that was either through work, for my husband or I, or through school.
Yeah.
and using those networks to build those relationships and create that network. Because in a way you are starting again, regardless of whether you're just moving states or moving countries. You do have to recreate that network.
Yeah, and I think it's something you have to really mindfully work on. Was that primary school at that point, by the way?
It was.
Yeah,
it was.
So again, I think that's a very different experience. Like, I think once your kids go to secondary school,
it is.
You don't really know the parents.
You don't see them anymore.
No,
because you're not doing school pickups.
And also think the kids' relationships are a bit more fluid. They test different groups, and suddenly they're besties with one person, and next week they're not, and there's someone else, and you may drop them off at their house, or those people will come over. But it's different at primary school. You're kind of at the school gates.
Absolutely.
You're going to school parties, and then you're hanging around.
Yes.
Birthday parties, and you end up making those kind of connections. So I think that's also interesting as well. I think that makes it easier.
It does.
I think, maybe moving without kids altogether at that point in your life, where you're going to be more social, but I think probably a secondary school age or beyond, that does get a bit more challenging. You, after 3 years with Delaware North, you moved to HostPlus. That made me laugh, actually, because I thought you've literally taken insurance and superannuation and hospitality, and you've squashed it. Like, that was the perfect job. I don't know what recruiter put you in that job, but I take my hat off to them, because that's an incredible match. And you went in as the head of PMO.
I did.
Your first head of PMO role. How did you know you were ready for that role?
I think there was a little bit of, to be honest, I wasn't 100% certain I was. But I keep on reading all those reports and studies which go, women will only go for a role when they're 100% ready. And so I'd often give myself a damn good talking to and going, no, you match 70% of those, go for it. And actually forcing myself to get out of my comfort zone and go, you can do that. I knew I had good project management skills. I knew I had done PMO style work when I was at APIA and AAI, where we were effectively setting up a PMO. And again, same very smart person who was the first person who said to me, run this meeting for me, would sort of go, how do you know what the status of all those projects are? None of us can. How do you know that? And I'm sort of going, I can't. It's just that skill set. And I think he, again, was the same person who sort of said, we weren't talking about PMOs at the time, but can you manage the portfolio of projects, please? Yeah. So it was then getting into that and being prepared to an extent, back yourself an element and sort of go, no, you do know how to do this. Let's go for it. And going in there and setting up the PMO.
Yeah, fantastic. I think I was reviewing your resume, and I was sort of counting it up, and I reckon at that point you've kind of been about 15 years or so around the project space.
Yeah.
So obviously at that point you had a good idea of what was going to work and what wasn't, and no doubt since then that experience has only kind of further built. But I was going to ask you, what's your secret sauce for a good project?
For a good project?
Or program. But generally, what do you think are the kind of components that lead to success?
Having a very clear understanding in the first instance as far as what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
Is a biggie. It's sort of one of those fundamental ones. But again, I've seen a few projects where people are going, what are we doing again? So being able to have that very clear understanding about what we're trying to achieve. I think also I do live by the whole time, cost, quality, you can have any two type scenarios. So it's the old triangle, but I really do live with that one. It's sort of a case of, so as part of having a good sponsor and having those conversations and going, so which one of these are we really going to drive for?
Yeah.
I think that one's an important one as well. A great PM and a great team, of course you can't do anything without both of those in there as well. And I've sort of seen different teams sit around a table for all sorts of different projects, everything from creating new products to implementing systems. And in those very early conversations, it's sort of a case of, how are we going to do this? And the general consensus around the table is actually, you know what, I'm really not sure, but we're going to work it out together.
Yeah.
And again, one of my old sayings about, well, how do we eat an elephant? It's the one bite at a time, and particularly at the beginning of a project, that's so important. It's a case of you get the right people around, right people, best people you can around that table, and I'm very honest in those sorts of situations and go, I don't know how we're going to solve it. So does anyone else have any ideas how we're going to solve it? And it's actually then building that together. I never pretend I've got all the answers because I know I don't. I'm definitely not the smartest person in the room there. It's actually getting those people who have got those different skill sets. They're subject matter experts for a reason. Yeah. So you bring them together, you create the purpose, try and have a bit of fun along the way. Again, that idea of, I remember saying quite a few years ago, if I walk past and I know there's a project team meeting underway and I hear a peal of laughter come out of the room, I'm going, yeah, okay, that's a happy team. That's it.
Look, absolutely, I can agree with you more. I think one of the worst company values someone can have is fun, because I think it's actually a byproduct of alignment. And you should never say to someone, you will have fun here when you come to work. What a terrible idea that you have to force fun. But you're right. I think the environments I've worked in over my career where, to me, laughter is a measure of people are aligned, they know what they're doing, they're focused, and they're achieving it. It's a good kind of litmus test.
It is.
And by the way, you sort of said, you don't need to be the smartest person in the room, and you don't need to be the expert in everything, but you did need to be the expert in project management.
Yes,
and that's what you brought to the table.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
You weren't an expert in the application or the project, but I think that's where it's a team effort of kind of how you pull people together on that. Was leadership something that come naturally to you?
I don't know whether I can actually answer that with a firm yes or no, because I guess you don't. I've had some people tell me that they love working with me, and they're really pleased to be part of my team, or those sorts of things. And I've got great relationships with a lot of people I have worked with, so I sort of think that tends to suggest that there's some elements of team leadership there which do come naturally. But at the same time, going back to that earlier comment about, I look at other people and sort of go, I really admire the way you work or the way you lead that team, and being able to pick some of that and apply that. And so trying to make me a better leader along the way. Again, the leader from Shannon's, the general manager from Shannon's, was the first person who really introduced me to the difference between leadership and management.
Okay.
And to actually be able to take that on my whole leadership journey has actually been important, because they both have a role. You do need to be a manager, you do need to be a leader. And so being able to pull those together and take them forward, I think, is really important.
So what's your definition of those two concepts?
At a really basic level, management is almost looking in, and leadership is looking out.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
so nice. At its simplest, that's sort of how I would tend to look at the difference between the two.
Yeah. Look, by the way, I completely agree. I subscribe to they're fundamentally two different things. Yeah. It was just interesting. I was curious to see what your articulation was about. After 4 years at HostPlus, you moved on to APT.
Yes.
And I know you're very fond of travel, so I feel like at this point in your career, you're just looking for jobs that are going to kind of tick your boxes, right? The discounted holidays must have been a big incentive.
Oh, look, I remember seeing the job for the head of PMO at APT, and I'm reading it and I'm rereading it and going, oh my God, please, if ever there was a role, which I think was made for me, because they were also only 10 minutes from home.
Oh, okay, right, yeah.
So it's travel, it's project management, it's head of PMO, and it's 10 minutes from home.
Yeah.
What's not to love?
Yeah.
And again, we talk about Shannon's a lot, but I had a lot of fun at APT as well. There was a lot of really fabulous people at APT. Time there was cut very abruptly short by COVID, because, of course, no one was travelling with COVID.
Well, again, I've got a bunch of questions about this because I'm quite interested in this, but my first question actually was that the travel industry is relatively traditional.
Yes.
In terms of the customer experience, and particularly for APT, I'd imagine that's quite an older demographic that would typically book an APT holiday, that probably aren't as tech savvy or tech engaged. I'm just interested in kind of how you kind of connect a traditional model through technology and how you went about kind of building the PMO to support that and the change?
I think if I can unpack that slightly and give it a slightly different slant.
Yeah, go for it.
APT was at a stage where they were sort of looking at their overall operations and we're actually realising they had so many different projects on the go. And yes, a lot of them were tech, but there were other projects which were underway as well. And it was actually a recommendation to them that they really needed to actually spin up a PMO and get someone to actually coordinate their projects and run their projects and have a central source. And hence the reason why I came in. And I think APT was at that stage where it was a traditional family-owned, it has been and it is a family-owned business, and had gone from being a smaller family-owned business in the sense of everybody in head office knew each other and all those sorts of things, to starting to grow bigger, and it was for 150 people probably in head office or something along those lines. So when you're starting to get to that sort of size for any organisation, your need for processes and systems and the way you do things is starting to change from when you're 50 people and everyone knows each other. And so that was the reason why there was the need for the PMO to come in and actually start to provide some of that support from all of their project methodology or giving them a project methodology and running the projects and all those sorts of things. So that was the reason why they actually created that role. In terms of how do they connect tech with the older demographic, one of the things which they spent a lot of time working on were some of the really front-end things, because, again, incredibly very proud of their customer service, really look after their customers, and quite rightly so, and a wonderful model as far as the customer experience they want to provide. And, again, when you talk about Let Light on the Hill, everyone knew that it was all about providing a really great customer service. But it was things such as, can we create apps so that, for example, if you're away from the ship, you're doing a river cruise and you're away from the ship, can even that app tell me, what are the local things which I should be seeing? Or how do I get back to the ship from wherever I am? So it's actually trying to apply a very practical problem.
Got it.
Back what someone needs, so what do our customers need, and how can we provide that? So it was actually trying to apply that lens to the tech which we were using, certainly from a customer facing perspective. Yeah,
great. And as you touched on there, the customer experience is paramount in that business. It's critical to them. In a terrible situation with COVID, COVID hitting, people probably spent a lot of money, life savings on their dream holiday, and then suddenly cancellations, refunds. Kind of what was going on in the business around that time?
Oh, look, it was, I don't want to say crazy because that suggests it's out of control, and it certainly wasn't under control. Like, that leadership team had formed a crisis team. They were really divided on two things, and one was actually getting people back. So we had team members who would be coordinating getting people out of Morocco, and they're on the phone midnight our time, 1 o'clock our time, coordinating to get people back. And again, that's the sort of care which APT did, was really about making sure they could get everyone back and how are they going to do it and all those sort of logistical issues. And at the same time, are we going to be working from home? And how long? Do we just assume we're going to be back after Easter? I think that was because we just didn't know. And I remember I looked out the window one day and I could see someone wheeling an office chair down the street to put in their car, and you're going, we're not in Kansas anymore, are we? But it was sort of, there was almost one half of the business which was going, what are we doing about getting people back? What are we doing about how far out do we cancel cruises?
Yes.
Do we are we just going to cancel for a few weeks? What are we going to do?
Yeah.
And then the other half is, and how are we going to keep the business working in terms of making sure that all our customer service staff can actually be taking phone calls from home, and doing all those audits, which I'm sure an awful lot of companies were doing the same sort of thing about what sort of access everybody has and what sort of access do we need and how are we going to do it. So it was really almost two streams of work happening at the same time to enable us to get to that point where the company could keep on going.
And then fundamentally, I think it was the end of March, and I think it was 27th of March that year, the borders closed.
Yeah.
and I don't know how long it was, maybe 2 years before they actually reopened them. But you're right, there was all these people overseas that were trying to get back, and then there was quarantine, and there was all this kind of other stuff going on. But I guess not only dealing with the immediacy of the issue, but you talk about leadership and strategy and looking at over here and what's on the hill. But it's very hard to know what was the top of that hill.
Yeah.
Or when we're going to reach the summit and things were going to get better. And I think in that travel industry, normally you can book flights, international flights, kind of 11 months or so out. But how far do you cancel? And how do you make revenue? Because I assume there must have come a point when some of the Australian sort of the domestic business, like trips to the Kimberleys and stuff like that, probably could have started to get rebooked and things. But
except for the fact that WA was closed for much longer than
sorry,
everybody
of course
else.
That's right, it's WA. That's right.
But that's where again the leadership team at APT were sort of going, all right, can we identify potential tours around the Daintree? Or can we do tours down to Tassie? Or can we go across to Adelaide Hills and be doing some tours around there? Because it was just trying to work out what can we do.
Yeah.
But again, as part of that, when we were closing things down and all the rest of it, one of the first things I had to do was actually make my team of PMs redundant.
Yeah.
Which is never a nice thing to do.
No.
But it was part of that acknowledgement that we did not know how long the organisation was going to be in that form. And we had, I think a few people had false starts. Okay, well, if we can be 4 square metres apart. I was wandering around the office one day and it was like a ghost town because there was obviously 2 people in the office or whatever. But we were with a tape measure. And sort of going, okay, so this pod is this big, so we could have people on the diagonal, and and that's what you were doing. And then, of course, that was still early in COVID when we were sort of thinking, well, that might be how we come back. But of course, we really ended up 2 years, not doing anything. So
that's funny. Actually, you're talking about that. I remember coming back in the office and getting the office ready for people to come in, and we were boxing off desks and taping them up, and you couldn't use this one, and putting up all the signs of remember to wash your hands and wear masks and stuff. It was it's a pretty interesting time.
It's a crazy time.
It's almost funny to look back now, and it's almost like a dream in some ways, as almost not a reality that it happened.
I very vividly recall saying to someone, just when we were in that mode of, okay, let's get the BCP organised, and I remember looking at her and going, the stuff you're doing now is the sort of stuff which only happens once in a lifetime as far as being involved in a project like this. Didn't quite realise just how much it was going to be once in a lifetime. Because, you just didn't know where it was going to be going, and to be able to, for anyone to be able to try and forecast what it was going to be looking like.
It was impossible. I remember we had those conversations as a business. We said, we'll hopefully never in our lifetimes have a moment when literally the world's put on pause in this way, and it's a chance for us to figure out what we want to do, actually look at the business really objectively through a lens of what do we want to stop doing, what do we want to do more of, and that's how we ended up rebranding. That was kind of part of the journey we went through. Obviously, it kind of came to an end there naturally with and I saw you did briefly move to a strategic role and so forth before you wrapped up, but you then moved, you did something very different. You moved to sort of a pseudo-government, I would call it, role with the Victorian Electoral Commission. What differences did you experience moving from the kind of private to the public sector?
The wonderful thing about the VEC is that because of the nature of our work, we are somewhat removed from a lot of the day-to-day machinations of government. And so I really didn't know what to expect, because it was my first stint in public service, and sort of going, wow, I really don't know what this is going to be like. But some of those big differences were more things around the formality on how certain things are done. So there is the additional degree of rigour around how you will present a report, or there is the additional rigour around how you recruit. And it is a case of ensuring you're doing things properly. I have been very pleasantly surprised. I sort of was, again, as an outsider coming to a public service, I'm sort of thinking, yes, Minister has a lot to answer for as far as, what's in it, what it's like to work in there, because it isn't a horrendous bureaucratic mess, and there is lots and lots of opportunities to be working quite quickly and effectively towards a business. And there's an awful lot of overlap between the two as well, where you've got people who are actually really passionate about what they're doing. They believe fundamentally in what they're doing. And it's, again, go back to that lot on the hill. Everyone actually has that same, we know what we want to do. We want to deliver really great elections.
Yeah, so again, there's so much there, isn't there? I think, again, I kind of assume because of the culture of governance, let's say, in some ways it makes project management easier.
It does. And I think I've been really, really lucky in that, particularly both at APT and at VEC, both of them were really keen to have a PMO. There wasn't a lot of pushback. And in the VEC in particular, it was sort of a case of, okay, we know we want to have good governance. We know we want to be able to respond to say, have we done things properly? Yes, we have. But at the same time, they actually don't have unlimited funds. So how are we making sure we're making the most of the money we've got, that we're working effectively, we're utilising all of our resources, we're not burning our people out. Yeah. We don't want rework, we don't want shoddy products. So there's so much commonality there as far as what we're trying to achieve. But again, the leadership team there was so supportive of what a PMO brings. And when you've got a leadership and an executive who are actually supportive of what you're doing, wow, doesn't it make life easy?
Well, yeah, 100%. And I know recently we placed a program director on a pretty big project, and I caught up with him a couple of weeks in and said, how's it going? Any surprises? And he said that the best thing here is the steerco are completely on point.
Yeah.
I've come in, the conditions for me to go and execute what I need to do is set up for me.
Yeah.
I can now get on and do my job
free
of that. And I think that is so important in that kind of role. You briefly left VC for a year and went over to Cleanaway on their Customer Connect program, and then you came back to VC.
I did.
What was it like going back somewhere?
Look, I left VEC on really good terms. And one of the reasons I went to Customer Connect was that opportunity to work on such a big program and test myself as far as, could I set up a PMO on something that big? But I was almost a little bit teary when I left VEC, because the people there are such a lovely group of people there. And I genuinely enjoy working with a lot of people. Yeah. So, I think it was over a casual meal and a couple of glasses of wine that it was sort of a case of, and I was actually providing advice to my boss and going, well, you're recruiting for the PMO, you need to be looking for this, you need to be doing that. Yeah, but we just haven't found what we, and I sort of went, well, I always loved the place. I'd come back after my 12 months. And it was sort of like, would you? And it was like, and that's where it came from. And I got such a warm welcome back. Like, I don't think I've ever had so many hugs on my first day back, where it was sort of a case of, it's so exciting to have you back. And that was really humbling, actually. Like, it made me very grateful to be back, but also really humble that people were genuinely happy. It wasn't just, you're back. Yeah. There were hugs, and it was sort of a case of, we're so pleased. When can we catch a cup for a coffee? And that was humbling, that people were just that happy that I had gone back. And I gave it a lot of thought, because I sort of thought, am I looking at this through rose-tinted glasses, and is it never quite the same? But the VEC's been on its own journey, so it's changed. I've changed. There's still plenty of opportunity. A lot of my old team was still there, so that was really nice. And again, really big welcome back. And they're such a great team that makes it really easy to slot in. They're a very easy team to lead. Yeah. So it was actually really nice. I never thought I'd be the sort of person who'd go back somewhere I'd been before. But
look, you don't see it very often on people's resumes. And I think maybe people were a bit too stubborn sometimes, because they perceive it as going backwards. But surely going back somewhere and learning the lessons of the past and being able to go back and do something better is actually progress, isn't it? Like I'm surprised more people don't kind of return to places.
And again, I keep on saying Shannon's was so instrumental. Shannon's at one stage had someone who came in and talked about the fact that sometimes you needed to have an alumni of people who would leave the organisation so they could come back and join the organisation. or joined the organisation to lead the organisation. And in a way, I came back to the VEC probably even a little bit more confident about what I had to offer there, and probably even a little bit more clear-sighted as far as what I could do. And we changed the role around a little bit, and we threw some extra stuff in, and so on, so that it was a bit bigger and meatier as far as some of the things I was doing. Yeah. But it was certainly a case of there is still lots to learn, and I guess I was even interested in the 12 months I was away to sort of go, have all the processes which I put in place, have they stood up? Because if they haven't, then that probably says something about me and the rigour of my own ability to put in processes and procedures.
I think the short gap makes the difference as well.
Yeah.
If it had been, say, 5 years, it had been like going to a completely different role, wouldn't it? But
absolutely.
You literally do get a kind of before and after in that 12 months. So, yeah, great. This is the lightning round, as I call it. So there's a few kind of punchier questions, more broad questions, not about roles specifically. And but I'm interested. So what are you most proud of in your career?
You've asked that question to other people, and I wasn't ready for that answer. I think I am most proud of the fact that I've been able to come in and try and make small differences to organisations. Whether it is how they deliver projects, whether I'm there or after I've been there. And probably the other thing is that I've been able to work with some people and maybe mentor or guide some people along the way and help them in their careers and created some really great friendships along the way. So that's not one thing, but that's probably a few things which I'm most proud of.
Well, there's a theme there. The theme's nurture.
Yeah, okay.
So is that you being authentic to yourself, do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I do my best to be an authentic leader. Yeah. It's one of those things which is important to me, and I always sort of, a little flippantly perhaps, but say I try to lead the way I want to be led.
Yeah.
And so it is that having that authenticity that I will be true to me as well when I'm leading a team.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Do you have any career regrets?
I've always said I would never do a degree part-time. Look, no, I don't think I do, because even if sometimes I've walked away and sort of gone, yeah, you know what, that wasn't really what I wanted, I then turn around and go, but I've learnt stuff. And even if it's sometimes learning what I don't like or what I don't want to do or how I don't want to lead, that's sometimes just as important, I think, to be able to learn from those and sort of go, yeah, that's what I don't want. And I can cross that off the list and keep on exploring what I do want instead. So I don't think there has been much in the way of regrets in that respect.
How about maybe the things you haven't done? So, for example, you love travel.
I do.
You love culture. Would you have considered at any point doing a stint overseas?
Oh, look, and that's, okay, well done, Anton. That's probably one of those things. Because my husband and I always said we would willingly have taken a job overseas if the opportunity presented itself. And I think what we originally said was something like, if there's an opportunity to go elsewhere out of Sydney, we'll take it. And we only moved 1,000 kilometres south. But it was that we were always up for it. I guess we never really properly explored it. And I think maybe if there was a second time round, we probably would have been far more proactive in actually exploring it, particularly pre-children and those sorts of things. But yeah, that would have been one of those areas where, an opportunity to have worked overseas would have been fabulous.
There could still be that role, that head of PMO for Chateau Neuf de Pape or something. I reckon we tick the boxes.
Oh yeah. You've been on my LinkedIn profile far too much.
I believe we're shaped by the feedback we receive. You know, I think you've talked about observational, observing other people and picking those traits, but we're also shaped by the direct feedback as well, I think, that we receive. What would you say has been the most significant feedback of your career?
When I was younger, boss would say to me, you can be too sensitive. You will take, you'll be a bit too emotional about it. You'll be a bit too sensitive about it. You've got to get a thicker skin. And that has probably been some of the best advice. And, every now and again you have that out of body moment where you're sort of going, I know a younger me would really have flipped my lid about something or other, whereas the older me sort of goes, all right, okay, fine, what are we going to do about it? Doesn't mean I won't get peeved about it or, things and all those sorts of things, but the ability to take the criticisms or the feedback or just that resilience of, again, an old boss used to say, the sun is still going to rise tomorrow, Leanne. And that sort of at times is really necessary when, if you think things are really starting to go down the toilet, it's sort of a case of, well, is the sun going to come up or not? And yeah it is. So it's sort of a case of get on and fix it.
That's tough feedback to take, particularly if you are sensitive. They were so sensitive.
I think I had the self-awareness to go, you're right.
Okay. Look, sometimes we need that mirror because we know it.
Yeah.
And then we hear it and it's like, okay, I can't really contest that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's obviously having an impact, and someone's told me that for a reason.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. If you had a singular piece of sage advice that you would give to the next generation, what would it be?
I think probably be true to yourself and be true to your brand. And by that I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of work comes down to your own integrity, and your brand is, I would hope, is about having integrity. Yeah. So that means that if you say you're going to do something, you do it. If you're not going to be able to do it, that's also okay, but make sure you tell people. I guess I'm coming back to that no surprises again.
Yeah.
And being able to have that integrity that people know they can trust you to either do something or give it your best shot. I think that is just so important, that at the end of the day, you can feel good about yourself. Other people will know that they can trust you to do something. Yeah. And I find that's really important. So having that integrity to yourself and to others about doing what you say you want to do or going to do, and managing those expectations is really important.
Yeah, I love it. Again, integrity is a bit like fun. Again, I think it's a terrible company value.
Yes.
As you never aspire to have integrity. Just have it.
Yeah.
I won't point out that 80% of banks in Australia have got integrity as a value, but that's a different story for a different day. Okay, I'm going to go off topic now. Completely left field now. I know you enjoy to sort of read.
Yeah.
What's on your read list?
I've just finished Legacy, which is, it's been around a few years now, but about the All Blacks. It's an ex-Sydney girl. That means I'm a frustrated Wallaby supporter as well. So I've just finished Legacy, and again, they talk about keeping a blue head and just really focusing on what's the problem and those sorts of things. And to see an organisation which has been so successful, I think that there's lots of lessons. And I find it fascinating that it still refers back to Jim Collins' Good to Great all the way through it. Which it is such a classic, but classics are classics for a reason, aren't they?
Yeah.
So that's in the workspace. On the reading list at home, I've just finished, being on holiday. So I was just finished Yellowface, which was talking about cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
And that was and I sort of finished that and closed it and went, I think I need to think about that one for a while. So that was an interesting book to read.
I read that book actually January this year.
Yeah.
And I felt the same. I put the book down and just didn't know how I felt.
Yeah.
And I'm still not sure I've really reconciled that.
I actually am the same. I've sort of gone back to it and thought about it a few times and sort of gone, I really not quite sure how I feel about that. So a much easier, and then my other one is, good Australian crime fiction. So there's a new Gary Disher out, which means that I'm wading my way, or not wading, I'm skimming my way through that one at the moment. So, something like that is fun as well.
Yeah, great. I also read on your resume that you'd recently bought a record player.
Yes.
I love music, right? It's a definite passion of mine. So I was just interested, what's the most recent record you bought?
How about the most recent record I haven't bought but is on the list to buy?
Yeah,
how's that?
I'll take that.
Okay. And people are going to groan, but I've been streaming it so far because I haven't actually bought it yet, and that's the latest Taylor Swift, Tortured Poets Society, and I'm so going, I'm enjoying this more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
But other than that, the record player has got lots of really old stuff. So I think not even that long ago, there is a recording, this is going to sound pretty obscure, of War of the Worlds, which had Richard Burton narrating and I think it had, like it's a 1970s thing, but I think it's one of those ones I grew up with and all those sorts of things. So being able to now have vinyl of stuff you grew up with, it's kind of cool.
Do you kind of go off hunting for it on the weekends and stuff through? I mean, Melbourne's great for that, by the way.
Yeah. Certainly making a trek every so often into particularly the Fitzroys and those sorts of areas and having a browse through. It's almost a throwback to the childhood where you'd sit there and let your fingers do the walking through all the records. So it's kind of nice being able to do that.
It's a very tactile experience, I reckon.
It is far more satisfying than just downloading off Spotify, with all due respect.
100%. I was quite excited. One of my favourite authors is a Japanese writer, Haruki Murakami. And I read, he's a massive vinyl collector. In fact, he's actually started off, he had a jazz record store before he started writing books. And I was reading his book about his music collection. And he actually said his favourite place when he goes on a book tour is to come to Melbourne, because it's where he finds the most obscure records.
Wow.
And like when that's on his list of tour dates, he gets very excited. And I felt a kind of sense of pride when I read that about sort of being a Melburnian these days. But there you go. So you probably weren't expecting those questions, but
no, that last one certainly wasn't what I was expecting. But that's okay.
I'm always fascinated when I go digging through this stuff. Look, thank you so much. It's been really insightful.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Look, it's always interesting just hearing stories and the journeys that people have taken and how they've kind of got to where they got to today. And it's been a great story. Thank you.
No, thank you, Anton.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Tales from Tech Titans, and be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcast. If you'd like to get more insights about tech careers, then check out the Emmbr, that's Emmbr LinkedIn page for the latest updates, articles, and engaging discussions.